A Viking harbor should have been a breeding ground for disease. Picture it clearly. Dozens of men packed beside wet wooden docks during warm northern summers. Fish drying in salty air. Mud everywhere. Ships arriving constantly from distant coasts carrying traders, warriors, tools, animals, and supplies across the North Atlantic world. No modern medicine, no sewer systems, no disinfectants, no understanding of bacteria. And yet these settlements survive surprisingly well compared to many medieval European cities. That is the mystery. Because by every modern assumption, Viking communities should have suffered catastrophic epidemics constantly, especially the harbors. Imagine crowded riverside settlements beneath cloudy Scandinavian skies filled with movement and noise. Workers unloading barrels from ships. Children carrying water between longhouses. Merchants arguing beside muddy market roads. Blacksmiths hammering iron while smoke drifts upward through damp summer air. Everything feels alive. And alive environments usually spread disease quickly, especially when people live close together. Now compare that to medieval London or Paris during the same centuries. Open sewage beside drinking water. Crowded streets trapping waste between buildings. Animals packed tightly among enormous urban populations. The conditions became disastrous. When plague eventually spread through Europe, millions died. Entire regions collapsed. But Viking settlements often functioned differently from the beginning. Not because the Norse understood microbiology. They did not. The real reason was more interesting. The Viking world accidentally built survival systems that reduced some of the worst environmental dangers medieval Europe created for itself. And those systems appeared everywhere. In ship design, in settlement layout, in bathing culture, in food preservation, even in daily grooming habits. The Vikings did not survive because they were cleaner by modern standards. They survived because many of their habits worked together as one connected system. Start with water. Most medieval European cities treated rivers like giant waste pits. Human waste, butcher scraps, dead animals, and industrial runoff often entered the same water systems people later drank from downstream. The results became predictable. Dysentery, parasites, contaminated wells. Repeated outbreaks spreading through dense populations, unable to escape polluted environments. Now picture many Viking settlements, smaller, more spread out, built beside moving water instead of trapped urban sewage systems. Fresh rivers mattered enormously. People washed clothing there, cleaned tools, rinsed bodies, disposed of waste farther away from main living areas. Again, not perfect sanitation, but separation matters. The further waste remains from food and drinking water, the lower the chance of catastrophic contamination spreading through entire communities. The Viking world repeatedly benefited from this principle even without understanding the science behind it, and water movement itself helped constantly. Fast rivers dilute contamination quickly. Coastal tides carry waste away from shorelines. Open airflow reduces stagnant moisture where bacteria thrive most aggressively. Now compare this to medieval alleyways where rainwater mixed with sewage between tightly packed buildings during warm summers. The difference changes everything. Density shapes disease, and Viking settlements usually remain less crowded than major European cities. That alone reduced epidemic spread dramatically. But the Norse also added another layer most people never think about. Bathing. Not modern sterilized bathing. Cultural bathing. Medieval chroniclers repeatedly complained that Viking settlers washed more often than local populations. One English writer became frustrated because Scandinavian men supposedly bathed regularly, groomed carefully, and attracted English women more successfully than local men did. The complaint sounds almost humorous today, but it reveals something important. Cleanliness inside Viking society carried social value. And once hygiene becomes culture instead of obligation, people repeat it automatically generation after generation. That changes entire environments over time. The Viking comb may have been one of the most important health tools in Northern Europe. That sounds ridiculous at first. Until you understand what lice actually did to medieval populations. Lice spread typhus, and typhus killed enormous numbers of people throughout history. Across Viking settlements in Scandinavia, Britain, and Iceland, archaeologists consistently uncover bone combs, tweezers, ear spoons, and grooming kits buried beside tools and weapons. Not isolated discoveries, repeated patterns. The Norse treated grooming as part of normal life. Daily hair care, beard maintenance, washing rituals, clothing maintenance. These were not luxury behaviors, they were habits, and habits shape survival more than occasional effort ever can. Picture warm summer evenings beside green rivers where villagers sit outside longhouses, cleaning wool clothing while smoke drifts upward through damp Scandinavian air. Children carrying water buckets from nearby streams. Workers washing hands after fish preparation. Travelers combing salt and dirt from hair beside crowded harbor camps. None of this looks revolutionary. That is exactly why it worked. The Viking world embedded hygiene into ordinary behavior instead of treating it like occasional emergency response. Meanwhile, many medieval European societies viewed bathing with suspicion. Some physicians believed hot water opened pores, allowing disease to enter the body more easily. Public bathing culture declined in many regions over time. Fear replaced habit. And once hygienic habits disappear across large populations, disease gains enormous advantages. The Norse never understood germ theory, but generations of observation taught them which behaviors kept communities healthier long-term. Comb the hair, wash the clothing, rinse the body, keep airflow moving through settlements, avoid stagnant waste buildup near homes. Simple habits repeated across entire populations create surprisingly powerful systems, especially before modern medicine exists. And perhaps that is the strangest part of all. The Vikings solved some public health problems accidentally simply by building cultures around practical routines instead of waiting for scientific explanation first. Even Viking ships worked differently from many later medieval vessels. Most people imagine long ships as filthy floating prisons, packed with exhausted warriors breathing wet air for weeks at sea, and in some ways they were. But the design itself accidentally reduced several major disease risks. Start with ventilation. Viking longships remained open to moving air constantly. No sealed lower decks trapping stagnant moisture beneath crowded sleeping quarters. No enclosed cargo holds turning into floating infection chambers during long voyages. Sea air moved continuously across the ship. Moisture dried faster. Waste left the vessel immediately. Fresh airflow reduced some of the environmental conditions where disease spreads most aggressively. Again, not perfect hygiene, but compare this to crowded medieval transport ships with enclosed lower decks, standing water, poor ventilation, and dense human confinement during warm weather. Those environments became biological disasters. The Viking longship functioned more like an outdoor platform than a floating building. And open systems behave differently than sealed systems. The same principle appeared on land too. Viking longhouses used roof vents, allowing smoke and moisture to escape gradually, while central fires dried interior air. Modern reconstructions show surprisingly effective temperature and airflow management for structures built entirely from wood, turf, and practical observation. The Norse repeatedly created environments that worked with nature instead of sealing themselves against it. And perhaps most importantly, Viking society remained highly mobile. Trade, fishing, seasonal work, travel, raids, ship repair. People moved constantly between open environments instead of remaining trapped inside dense urban centers year-round. Movement disrupts stagnation. Stagnation feeds disease. The Viking world accidentally benefited from this pattern repeatedly. Not because the Norse were biologically superior, not because they possessed secret medicine, but because their systems distributed environmental risk differently from much of medieval Europe. And when plague eventually spread across the continent, Those differences became impossible to ignore. The Viking world was not clean by modern standards. People still became sick. Parasites still existed. Infections still killed families without warning. This was not a hygienic paradise. But compared to many medieval European societies, the Norse often built environments that reduced catastrophic epidemic spread surprisingly well. And they did it without universities, without microscopes, without modern medical theory. That is what makes the story fascinating. The Viking system worked because every layer reinforced every other layer. Smaller settlements reduced density, moving water reduced contamination. Bathing culture reinforced grooming habits. Open ship design improved ventilation. Food preservation reduced desperate shortages during winter. Mobility connected communities before local disasters became irreversible. No single innovation explains the difference. The entire system does. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson hidden inside the Viking world. Civilizations do not survive only through intelligence or technology. They survive through habits repeated consistently across generations. The Norse embedded practical survival behaviors into ordinary daily life until culture itself became infrastructure. Wash regularly, maintain tools, preserve food, control moisture, disperse waste, keep moving, simple routines, repeated endlessly. Meanwhile, many wealthier medieval societies built dense urban systems that concentrated contamination faster than they could control it. When plague arrived, millions died. The Vikings never fully understood why some of their habits worked, but survival rarely waits for perfect scientific explanation. Sometimes people observe patterns long before they understand causes, and perhaps that explains why Viking settlements still feel strangely intelligent even now. Because beneath the timber, smoke, rivers, ships, summer rain, crowded harbors, and green Scandinavian landscapes existed something more powerful than luck. A civilization quietly designing itself around survival long before most of Europe realized how deadly the world around them could become.